And if you're able to share, like, as I'm chit-chatting at the very beginning, if you're able to share the link, that would be amazing.
The link.
Usually bras fit small-chested women like this.
Sorry.
Gappy.
If you're able to share the link, that would be amazing. The link. Can you hear me right now, Kirsten?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. I think we're in the right place. I know I have the right people with me. Thank you everyone who is joining us on Facebook Live for our live stream event. I am Susanna Bannon. I am the program manager at Mourning Our Losses. And I'm really excited this evening because we are going to be sharing some really important revolutionary media with you in the form of a mini documentary titled Dying in Prison. And I don't want to say too much about it because I do want to allow the wonderful director to talk a bit about his work. He is here with us tonight, Tran. And we also have Mourning Our Losses advocacy fellow, Chanthan Bunn, who is an amazing human being that I'm very privileged to work with. And so we are going to, and Kirsten Pickering, I cannot forget her, who is going to be serving as our wonderful mediator tonight. And we are going to be sharing this film. It's very short, just a few minutes, and then just kind of unpacking the issue that it takes a closer look at, one that we don't hear a lot of people talking about in mainstream public discourse about efforts at prison reform and other mainstream advocacy campaigns. And it's an important one. It's dealing with people who are sick and dying and elderly in the carceral system. So I will turn it over to our MOL's advocacy fellow, Chanthan Bunn, so he can introduce himself, and then he can kind of pass the torch through the rest of our participants.
Hey all, how you doing? Thank you for coming to this Facebook Live with us to highlight this important issue of dying in prison. I'm Chanthan Bunn. I go by Bunn. I'm the community advocate for MOL, Mourning Our Losses, and I'll pass it to Thanh.
Hey, this is Tran. Pronouns he, him. I am the director of this piece, Dying in Prison. I was a part of Fortis when I was on the inside. Now that I'm free, I am the Ella Baker Center's Senior Policy and Comms Fellow. So happy to be here with y'all today.
I'm Kirsten Pickering, she, her pronouns, and I'm very excited to be the moderator for this event. Very privileged to be here with you all tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Okay, well, without further ado, I am going to share screen and we can watch this awesome piece that Thanh directed. And I also look forward to hearing more about the Fortis Productions crew because they're awesome and it's a unique program. So let me find my screen share.
The most scariest thing in your life is fighting for your air. I didn't think I was going to make it. My oxygen level was 73. But then when they hit me with an EpiPen, I knew it was serious. My name's Gary Cooper, age 73, been down for 20 years. I'm a veteran, served in Vietnam from 66 to 68. My face was so swollen, you know, they didn't recognize me. I've been hospitalized 3 times because of leukemia. My doctor wanted to give me compassionate release because of the fact that all my health issues. I've had heart disease, leukemia, neuropathy. I've had 12 surgeries for basal cells, you know, that's precancerous, you know, skin graft for one of them. So what I've been going through medically is unbelievable. You know, I don't know what's going to happen next. You're not going to believe this, but this is what I take every day. Iron. I have to take iron because I'm anemic now. They don't know why, but I am. I had to have a colonoscopy, and then they ran a tube down my throat to find out if I'm bleeding inside. That's what they thought. My doctors are what came up with compassionate release. But then the oncologist told them I can live for a long time with my type of leukemia. Apparently, I don't know about that now.
Actually met Cooper on the yard, I believe. And I used to always see Cooper walking around with a bunch of energy. He was a vibrant person. Still is vibrant, but he was a mobile person. And every time, I didn't even know him. And every time I see him on the yard, he would wave and say hi. I would see this guy and he would stop and talk to me. He would give me his time. One of the most precious things I think you can give somebody. And we bonded. Been here during a couple of years before the COVID, I just really started to see him deteriorate. And it's kind of sad that he's still here with all the medical problems and stuff that he's dealing with. I don't see the reason why he's still here. He's no longer a threat to society.
There's a Vietnam paper that comes out, VVA, Vietnam Veterans of America. And you look at they have what they call TAPS. That's where people, have passed away. And you look at their age, and it's my age.
So that
Get up to 20% off during special tailgate sale now through October.
Okay. That film, as short as it may be, is it kind of packs a punch, I feel like. And Kirsten, as our moderator, do you want to kick off our discussion about the film?
Yes, thank you so much, Susie. Yeah, it's a very powerful film. And I think the first thing I want to highlight here is, the conditions in which it was made. So Thanh, I'd love to ask you to just shout out the folks who were involved in this film. I know you're the director. What other folks were involved? Can you tell me a little bit about them?
All right, shout out to the Fortis team on the inside still. Dre was a camera person. Edmund Richardson was a camera person. We had Rashid. We had a few other fellas supporting with grip. So I just definitely want to shout them all out. Jesse Rose supporting with sound and supporting with all the grip stuff also. So you can see the credits at the end, but really there was so much more hands involved too. So shout out to the whole team on the inside.
Thank you. And so this production crew, I remember being so interested in hearing about you guys and learning about you over the years. What's your mission? And what is unique about this crew?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that. And I'll read exactly what they wrote because I want to make sure that I elevate their voices of what they believe the mission is, because I think it's important to highlight, like, now that I'm formally incarcerated, it's definitely very different than being currently incarcerated, right? And this work with Fortis is about elevating the currently incarcerated voice. So I want to share what it says right here on the fortisproduction.org website, right? It says, our mission: Fortis uses the power of film to improve public safety and end mass incarceration by providing a platform for incarcerated people to tell their own stories, as well as learning marketable film skills. Fortis leverages the storytelling power of impacted communities to transform negative social narratives about incarcerated people and build new economic mobility to interrupt cycles of poverty and violence. So shout out to them, shout out.
Wonderful. Could you talk about, you had experience on the production crew when you were inside. What's the value of having this kind of media production programming inside prisons? Like, what did it teach you? What did you get from it?
Right. It's definitely multi-layered, right, about why this is important that currently incarcerated people are doing film. I think the very first thing that was very glaring to us about the necessity of currently incarcerated folks telling their own stories is the way that media has come into the prison, specifically San Quentin, right? Media has come in, they have interviewed people, right, and misled people to believe that their stories is about one thing, and then the story turns out to be something completely different, right? And I believe that's extremely harmful. And we have seen the harm that this has caused within our communities on the inside, right? With media misrepresentation. So I think that was one of the biggest things, that we wanted to be able to tell our own narratives, because we were tired of media coming in and then massacring our narrative and demonizing us on the inside under false pretenses. So that was like one of the big things about why it was important, is that we wanted to tell our own narratives because we were tired of being lied on, right? So that was a huge part. And I think a second part of it too, right, and they name it in their mission, right, is that we wanted to develop film skills for folks currently incarcerated to create employable opportunities upon release, right? Because we recognize, like, a growing social media age right now, film content is desired everywhere. There has never been a greater demand for film content, right? So there's never been a better opportunity for people to learn film skills to be able to enter this new job market that is emerging, right, and expanding, right? So I think that's why we focused on 3 to 5 minute videos for social media and YouTube. And we wanted to make sure that folks had the skills necessary to return to society, but also return to society with employable skills. So I think that was like a major thing for us too, making sure folks was employable.
That's so great. Could you walk us through what it's like to shoot a video like this inside San Quentin? I mean, it's an experience like very few people have had. I mean, what do you have to do? Like, what are the steps to doing this? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, it's a whole process. Let me tell you that it is so difficult to navigate planning a film shoot on the inside, right? So I'll break down, like, for most filmmakers, they know this process, but I'll break it down simply. Any film, whether it's a long 1 hour documentary or a 5 minute or a 30-second piece, it starts in 3 stages, right? There's the pre-production, production, and post-production, right? Pre-production is basically the planning stage and figuring out the logistics, like, what's the story? Who are the characters? Where are we going to film this at, right? And also, who's going to be the director, the camera person, etc., right? And that's all pre-production work. That alone is a nightmare. And especially during the COVID era inside of prisons, it's a huger nightmare, because now we have to navigate multiple things. Like, one, we're navigating, all right, we don't know whether we're going to be locked down or not, because as we know right now on the inside, at least I hope people know that on the inside, there's currently rolling lockdowns, right? People are up and down, up and down. COVID is still well and alive inside of prison. So it's very hard to plan. We're going to film next week because we don't know if we're going to be up next week. So that was the biggest, one of the hardest challenges is scheduling, right? So after, say, on a miracle shot, we're able to schedule it and we're there filming. And then there's like all these different other struggles that we face, like making sure our characters are, whoever the subjects that we're interviewing, are able to leave their workplaces, they're able to leave their education areas, so they can come down to the media room and be interviewed and filmed by us, right? And then lastly, that's I spoke about the pre-production, which was planning the shooting, the filming, and then the production part, which is the actual filming. And then lastly, the post-production part. And this part is also very difficult because we have outdated equipment, we have outdated software, right? We use Final Cut Pro X in there. And when I tell people about Final Cut Pro X out here, they're like, Final Cut Pro, like, who uses that? He's like, we do on the inside, right? Like, we're just making it happen, right? So one, we're using outdated equipment and software, but two, like I said, the lockdowns. We don't have a consistent schedule to be like, all right, I'm going to devote the next 5 to 6 hours to edit this piece, right? So like that's also another difficulty when it comes to production. So I really appreciate that question.
Yeah, I mean, you guys do so much to jump through the hoops. I know right now, West Block has just recently started another COVID quarantine. It's very hard to plan anything inside, harder than it's ever been. So yeah, kudos in getting this done. Yeah, could you talk a bit about the theme of this piece? You know, how did you decide to focus on dying in prison and folks seeking compassionate release?
Absolutely. Real quick too, I also want to name like another difficulty of like doing film in prison is that we had to teach ourselves how to do film. We had no professional help. We had a couple allies come in and do like a workshop here and there, but for the most part, it was all watching tutorials. It was getting on a camera, learning from trial and error. So that was like a huge hurdle we had to overcome too, was the self-education of how to do film, right? So I wanted to name that burden. And now to answer your question about like, how did we come to the theme of dying in prison? I just want to just shout out once again to Gary Cooper, because I lived on the same tier with Gary Cooper, right? And every day Gary Cooper would walk by with the biggest smile on his face, with the best energy. However, everybody on the tier knew Cooper was dying. We all knew Cooper was fighting cancer. And then more often than not, at least about 5 to 6 times, there was times when Cooper had to go man down, which is an emergency. Like that's when he is unresponsive and he needs emergency medical care, right? So he has been sent to the outside hospital, right, which is reserved for people who are facing serious illnesses multiple times. There are multiple times when I thought that Gary Cooper was not coming back, right? And it was like every time Gary was sent to the outside hospital, like the whole tier became somber. Like his presence is so felt and his absence is felt even more, right? And I remember for years I would hear, I'm like, man, I wish somebody would help Cooper. I would always like, I would be in my cell reading a book and I would hear people talking about Cooper on the tier and they'll be like, man, somebody needs to help Cooper. Somebody needs to help Cooper, right? And I think for me, like why I started doing film is because I wanted to utilize this platform while incarcerated to help people, right? So I'm like, I have this whole platform afford this. Like literally the reason why I started doing film was to help people like Cooper. I'm gonna tell his story, right? And that's how we came to the theme of dying in prison and about compassionate releases. And beyond just Cooper, there was one thing I noticed also was an incredible large elderly population inside of prisons, right? And during COVID, we saw a chunk of this elderly population pass because of COVID. And I feel like there was too many things going on at that time, like all the deaths that I was witnessing on the inside and potentially losing Cooper too. I said, you know what? I can't do everything, but I can do something, right? So that's something was to be able to tell this story. So that's why I dove in and said, you know what? Let's talk about compassion release. Let's talk about Cooper.
Thank you so much. I want to bring in some other folks here too, because I know we have 2 other folks on the call who know about just how dire the health situation of many people inside prisons in America is. So this question is for all of you, including Thanh. Could you talk about what compassionate release is and what are the possibilities of this method of release and what are the obstacles? What have you seen in your experience? And maybe I'll ask Fun to start us off, just to start off with a new voice, and we'll come back through everybody.
Yeah, compassion release is when a person is so sick and only have about 6 months of life left, and they ask for a compassion release through the governor associated with the medical that's telling how their illness is and giving them a last 6 months to live. And from my experience, I have never seen many people receive compassion release. I've seen 1 or 2 where the person was released and died like the next day or died within a week. I met a lot of older folks that always told me about compassion release, and they're fighting stage 4 cancer and bedridden. A lot of them never saw it, and it was discouraging. And that's why sometimes I often say that COVID is a curse and also a blessing, because COVID brought light to compassion release. COVID brought light to the elders that are dying. COVID made the community, made public official look at elderly folks. And when I was incarcerated and younger, I never understood why a person that is cancer ridden, stage 4 cancer, can barely move, could barely speak, like Cooper, could barely walk. How could they judge him still a danger to society? And that's one thing that I never could ever imagine, how a parole board, how the governor, or even CDCR labeled this person a danger to society. And it never made sense to me. So through my whole 23 years in prison, it was sad to see the elders die in their cell. And I've witnessed a lot. I've seen the body get carried out in the sheets, and all we knew was like he died in his sleep, or he died because he couldn't get his medication, or he died because of lack of care. I mean, I've seen folks that go through cancer and nobody's watching on them except for the nurse coming by to give them medication twice a day, one in the morning, one at night. And some of the folks couldn't even get out of bed to get their medication. So with Cooper's documentary that Tran did, MOL was moving away from just memorializing people. We sat down and we talked, and our whole team talked and said, you know, the conditions in there got to change. We have to speak up about the condition that's in there, about our folks that are just waiting to pass away because of old age, because of sickness. And I came across Tan's documentary, and I was like, oh, this is what the public got to see. This is what the public gotta look at to change the narrative of compassion release. You know, and I think the public still think that, oh, you know, he did his crime, let him pay all his time, let him die. But when you're face to face and see somebody like Gary, how could you call him a danger? You know, and how could you not empathize with somebody that's dying of cancer, that could barely walk to go take a shower? And Tan and I seen this many a time when we were, because Gary only lived 2 cells away from me when I was incarcerated. The whole tier would run to his aid, from walking to the shower, from going to get his child for him when he can't make it, from go getting his medication for him, from calling man down for him, and just checking on him. And without his friends that lived on the tiers, other incarcerated folks that cared for him, the nurse never checked up on him. They called him for a ducket, that's about it, but they never checked up on him. We checked up on him. And that's why the care for folks that are going through life-threatening diseases and stage of their life is nil to none unless you're bedridden and you're in a coma or anything. So compassion release needs to be more compassionate. Just because you put the word compassion on there doesn't mean it was compassionate. They need to be more compassionate. They need to get away from the paperwork and look at that person and see you know, his or her few months left on this earth. You know, could we treat that person like a person? And that's what that's what I want to see in this live and this documentaries, having people understand that, you know, let's stop looking at people as a number, as paperwork. Let's look at the person as a human being and their last few months of life.
Thank you so much, Fun. Yeah, hearing you both talk about Gary is so moving to me, and I know that that it means a lot to him too, to know that, to share his story and to be able to put his story out there. You're both coming from a California context as far as compassionate release is concerned. Can you talk a little bit about what efforts are going on in California that could help people like Gary? Are there any things that our listeners, our viewers could support that would, that might help to change the paperwork, change the bureaucracy of the process?
Absolutely. I can speak to that. Yeah, there's an assembly bill called Assembly Bill 960, I believe. Yes, it's 960. And it's about compassionate release and cleaning up the process, because you heard a little bit about when Bun was explaining it, and I don't know about y'all, but I was confused, right? And I was confused because the whole process is confusing, not because Bun is confusing, right? So I really want, even though Bun can be confusing at times, but I want to name that the whole process is so convoluted and there's so many gatekeepers, right? That by the time a person is somehow eligible for this, like Bun named, they already passed away, right? So there's a bill right now going on in California, AB 960. I believe it's waiting for the governor's signature. But basically what this bill will do was streamline the process and change some of the criterias and take away some of the gatekeepers in the process that makes it difficult for people to come home, right? And Bun said that for compassionate release, he want to see some more compassion in the term compassionate release. Me, I just want to see more releases, right? Like I want to see the release part, right? Because like you can claim to be as compassionate as you want to, but if your actions aren't following up by like letting these people at least die with dignity, like I don't feel there's any compassion in that at all. So that's some of the efforts going on in California right now.
Thank you so much, Tan. And I want to bring Susie in here, who has some experience at a different state. I know in every state, this process is different, right? Susie, you're from Texas. Can you speak to a little bit about what the process is like there, and if it's similar to what Tana and Bun are describing?
Thanks, Kirsten. Yes, I can say that the process in Texas is very similar to what the folks from California have described, in that it's exceptionally confusing, filled with bureaucratic red tape, and seems to be, from my perspective as someone who studies systems and processes within institutions, deliberately so. I think anybody who's been incarcerated understands the phrase "hurry up and wait," because there are moments where there's a great deal of urgency, typically like when it's dealing with getting folks, like if there needs to be a cell search or something like that, like hurry up, get out of here, we need to take care of this. But when it comes to things like applying for things like compassionate release, or sending in a request to go to medical or things like that, those types of things, when dealing with paperwork, institutional processes, there's a whole lot of waiting that goes on. And so compassionate release in Texas is actually called medically recommended intensive supervision. And the criteria for being approved for that are also very similar to what has been described as in California. In essence, either the person needs to be diagnosed as having a terminal illness and dying within 6 months of release, or they need to be in a vegetative state, or be experiencing some sort of significant either cognitive or mental impairment that requires long-term care, and an inability to kind of take care of themselves. And so the criteria seems very clear, and there are plenty of people that meet that criteria. But what we see is that even when people are approved for that, the process takes so long once they are viewed as eligible and the paperwork starts to make its way through classification, the other departments within the institution, we see a lot of folks dying before they even have the opportunity to go home and die with their family. And so we have folks dying, especially during COVID, all by themselves, in complete isolation, in horrific conditions, when they've already been approved to go home and die with that dignity, with their loved ones surrounding them. And so I do have just a couple of stats to mention. Some great folks at the University of Texas did some research looking at the effects of parole and release from prison during the initial COVID-19 pandemic, the first year of it. And they found that at least 42 people between March 2020, when prisons started being put on lockdown, and March 2021, at least 42 people died that had been approved for parole, that were just waiting to go home, and that just never made it. Also, the prison population in terms of what are considered geriatric incarcerated people, they call them geriatric offenders. I don't use that term. Their population has increased almost 65% in the last couple of decades. So because we do have a larger, what are considered the boomer population, that is going to be our largest population that is incarcerated. And so now almost 15% of our prison population in Texas, that's over 150,000 people, are people that are considered geriatric. The geriatric people within the TDCJ, or within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, also account for half of the medical care costs that are delivered through the TDCJ. And so we have a large population of people who are likely to, at least a portion of them are likely to be qualified for the medically recommended intensive supervision. But again, we see that there are these delays, these holdouts, these hurry up and wait situations where they're not getting to their destination, unfortunately, because of the conditions, because there is no urgency to show compassion towards people that are suffering. I also wanted to point out something that I noticed in not only in the requirements for medically recommended intensive supervision in Texas, but there are other reasons for denial. One of those is that the person cannot have an ICE detainer. They cannot have an immigration detainer, which for me, as someone who, again, is interested in institutions and language and processes, that just brings up the question, so someone who has an ICE detainer is just not qualified for compassion. If what we're doing is compassionate release, someone who is perhaps undocumented does not qualify for that. And I think that that's such a blatant representation of an ideology that we see at work there within that carceral system. And that's just, it gives me chills. It makes me just so, I have a visceral response to that. And so there are other, you cannot have life without parole. You cannot be sentenced to death. And then there is a particular concern for aggravated sentences. So if the person is considered a threat to society, then they cannot be considered for compassionate release. When I hear that term, I always ask, well, what do you consider a threat to society? Is it a geriatric man who's been incarcerated for 40 years, who happened to have been arrested for an aggravated charge? A lot of times when you see paroles denied in the first place, there are very vague and abstract rationales provided for those. Often it is, potential for future offense, things like that are based on the perceptions of certain crimes, certain criminal history, certain backgrounds, lots of risk analysis, but it's not always representative of who that human being is that is sitting in front of you asking for that reprieve, that compassionate release. And so I think it's a really important issue. I'm so grateful that Tran and Fortis made this film. I'm glad that we're having this conversation. And in terms of work in Texas that you can support, there is actually not currently a bill happening, but there may be one. Our legislative session actually starts in January this year, or next year in 2023. But you can visit the fam.org website, which I will drop in the Facebook chat. And they are actually doing sort of a nationwide analyses of state by state compassionate release efforts. And you can get on their mailing list and they can update you as to what's going on and how you can support that work.
Thank you so much, Susie. Yes, please do drop that in the chat on our Facebook page so folks can get involved in this issue where they live. This is an issue, different kinds of obstacles in different states, but everywhere it sounds like there's a real bureaucratic obstacle to using this relief. You mentioned, that there's this history component to whether people sometimes are considered for compassionate release. I want to read this quote from Gary Cooper, who was the subject of the documentary today. I want people to know that we aren't the same person that committed our crimes. Gary, Gary says it best. Is there anything that either Bun or Tan know that we could do for Gary specifically, that if the audience might want to reach out to him or support his case, what should they do?
Absolutely. I'll start. As of right now, I have great news that Gary Cooper was found suitable for parole. So now thank Jesus. All right, I just pray that he makes it home. He makes it home in time. So one thing that you can do right now, just help support Cooper's spirits. You can look up Gary Cooper in California Inmate Locator, and you can find his CDCR number, his address, like right to Cooper, and he should be returning home soon. So we can support him financially, support Cooper as he returns back to society with all of these medical illnesses, right? And I want to name that he wasn't able to secure compassionate release. He had to go through a grueling parole board process multiple times at that to finally be found suitable for release. Like Gary Cooper fought all the way to the end, right? So I want to just acknowledge Cooper's strength and how he inspires not just me, but like the entire tier that he lived on, right? And everybody he encountered. So one of the biggest things you can do right now is you just write Gary Cooper, get in contact with him, ask him how you could support him, whether it's some clothes or some money, whatever it is you can do. So I think that's the best way to support him as he's getting ready to return home.
And Tan, sorry to interrupt, Kirsten, if Gary does have some sort of fund, GoFundMe, whatever fundraising platform folks use, please share that with us and we will post that to our pages.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll tell them, go start a GoFundMe, right? Let's fund Cooper.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that folks in California support the bill. Call Gavin. It's on his desk. Let's get it signed so we get more of our folks that are reaching the end of their life to come home to their family and pass away in peace. And I'm so happy that Gary got a date. And that just shows you how insane it is to ask for a compassion release and then not get it, but have to fight tooth and nail to come home. And for somebody in Gary's condition to go to a parole board, that's a lot. That's really a lot. So bless Gary. He's always been a joker. Gary always kept us smiling on the tier. I just want to point out that Gary, even through his sickness, always had jokes for us when he came by, or when we went to visit, always had a kind word or just made us smile. And that's just the person he is. And I'm so happy that he made it home. He's gonna make it home. And yeah, let's support him any way that we can when he comes home with his re-entry. He deserves it.
Well said. Well said. I want to thank all of you for this great event. And Tan, what a what a great documentary. Looking forward to seeing more from Fortis Productions. And yeah, Susie, do you want to close us out? Do you have any final thoughts for us? Oh, yes, we should check to see if there are any questions. I think if folks who are watching this stream want to leave questions in the comment box on the Facebook event page, we'll wait here a moment to see if anybody has any. In the meantime, Susie, do you have any thoughts after this event that you want to share?
Yeah, I wanted to plug a project that Mourning Our Losses is currently working on and will be launching next year. You know, our work, if you're not familiar with Mourning Our Losses, and Bun spoke briefly to this, we are a project that emerged during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. A group of activists, educators, incarcerated folks, and other supporters of prison abolition got together knowing that the COVID-19 pandemic was going to have such a drastic impact on incarcerated people because of the close quarters in which they live in, because of the subpar healthcare that they are faced with. And so we recognized that there was going to be a massive uptick in deaths in prisons, in jails, and in detention centers. We also knew that, you know, the dominant narrative about carcerality, about being incarcerated, about being a person who is labeled a felon, that tells us that we, because I myself am someone who is formerly incarcerated, that we are not deserving of the same dignity, care, compassion, respect, and grieving that the rest of the population is worthy of. And so we knew that there were going to be many, many people who lost loved ones, who were incarcerated, and who did not have a space to share that grief. Grief that is not necessarily welcome by everybody. And so we created the mourningourlosses.org website, where we host memorials that are written about people who died while in the carceral system. And we share who they were without any dehumanizing language that references their crime of conviction or anything like that. They are just human beings who were loved and who are missed. And we have since expanded our mission to include all people who die while living or working in the carceral system. And so we are still accepting submissions for memorials. If you have been impacted by this issue, we are happy to publish those. We are also accepting artwork and various writings, essays, poems. We just want to provide a space where people can express that grief, process that grief, and honor the people that they love. And so part of our efforts going into 2023 is now going to be a traveling memorial, which will be an interactive, experiential art exhibit that is constructed by us. Bun is actually building out a section of it, and we will be displaying artwork submitted by people who are currently incarcerated, by our artists. And it will be representative of the experience of COVID-19 during incarceration and the loss that comes along with that. And so keep your eyes peeled. If you're not already in touch with us, please like our page. We'll be posting updates about it. You can also join our mailing list. I send out updates monthly about that. And yeah, if you know artists who are currently incarcerated, please contact me. The email address is mourningourlosses@gmail.com. I will put that in the chat right now. And I will send you the submission forms where they can submit their art to us for consideration. People who are selected for display in the actual exhibit will receive a $100 award. And if you are not selected, your artwork will still be photographed and displayed on our website. So yeah, we're really excited about launching it. It's going to be a really powerful exhibit, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Susie. Thanh, I want to give you a last word. We don't have any questions right now, but if folks want to see more of your work, where could they go? Could you share your information and how they could find out, more of your videography and more of your work?
Absolutely. You can find more of the work that I've created in the past on YouTube. If you search up Fortis Productions, right? You can also find this at fortisproductions.org, right? So those are two sites, two places you can find my past work. And I also want to do a quick plug for Gary Cooper. He also did an episode on the podcast Uncuffed, shout out, right? So the episode just released today, so y'all check it out. Hear more about Gary Cooper on there, and just about a great human being he is. And you can also hear more about compassionate release on that episode also. So shout out to Uncuffed and shout out to Gary Cooper and Forward This.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I've learned a lot. Really appreciate all of you being here, and always love to see your faces. So yeah, thank you all who joined us for this session. Please do check out the chat for other links, the links that are mentioned here. And we hope we'll get to share more of the work I hope I get to hear more about the work of everybody here in the future. So, all right.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was great.